Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of Everything's Fine, Probably. No Stuart Shirley in this show, I'm afraid. But if you listen to our last episode, The Way of the Harlequin, you'll have heard me talking to Michael Woods about rugby, Quins, and being part of a community. That was an edited version of a longer conversation which we've decided to put out here in full for those of you who enjoy hearing two blokes talk about sport. Hope you like it. Great morning, Michael. Thanks for joining us from the other side of the world.
No worries.
How you doing?
Yeah, great. 2 weeks off, school holidays. It's just ticked over quarter to five. I'm gonna have a nice chat with you, and then I'm gonna go and see what the rest of my evening brings. I've got a few more days off before I've got to go back to work, so I'm gonna go and try and head out this evening and go and have a beer somewhere and see what's on the TV and have a nice evening.
Fantastic. Sounds like a good plan to me. So, tell me, as a starting point, how does the whole Harlequins fan journey start for you?
So Will and I, of my podcast co-host, our grandfather played for Quins post-war, 1952 to 1959. So growing up in Brighton, the south coast, they were our closest team. I used to play rugby at Lewis Rugby Club when I was started at 6-7 years old, and we would go and play in these. They used to be called the Curtain Raiser Cups. They'd be on the sort of back pitch behind the stoop where there's now a little playground and there's a sort of 4G football pitch now. But we started there, going up sort of once a year when we were 7 or 8, going to watch Quins, and it's been in my family as long as I can ever remember. And then in 2017, I moved to university in Twickenham at St Mary's, and I'd spent 18 months mucking around in Australia on a gap year, playing hockey, growing my hair long, having too many beers, and I wasn't really thinking about further education that much. And one of the only really sort of driving factors of why I chose university was because I knew that Quins was down the road. So I thought, I'll get to go and watch them a bit, and there'll be a degree in it as well. So that was nice. And then, then COVID came and lockdown came, and it became a bit of a tough time for anyone that wanted to go and watch sport and be around sport. And then in January 2021, Will texted me and said, "Do you want to have a crack at starting a podcast?" We were both sitting in our flats, bored out of our mind, and I went, "Yeah, mate, that sounds like a bit of a laugh. Let's give it a go." And well, what are we, 5 years later? Here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, Quins. I love Quins. Supported Quins for many, many years. We don't win a lot,
No.
unfortunately, but no one can accuse us of being glory hunters or anything like that. What is it do you think keeps people going? 'Cause it's such a well-supported club,
Yeah.
and such a well-loved club. What do you think it is that keeps drawing people back?
Well, I don't really remember the 2012 win. It was a bit sort of pre my real time of nosing on rugby and understanding things. And then we won it in 2021, and it became a bit of a whirlwind sort of 6 months for us. But in terms of just sort of regularly going back, I first started going on my own in 2017. I had a season ticket in the South Stand on my own. And then in my second year, I moved in with a couple of mates who weren't big rugby fans, but were in and around it. And then it became something that we did together. And then in 2021, we won it. And the online community of Quins really sort of went through the roof a little bit. We started a podcast. Quins have really ramped up their social stuff. And they were doing Quins Live with Dave Rogers. They were, really sort of breaching out and making sure that people felt connected when you couldn't actually go and watch. And then by the time we all got back ground, we'd all sort of, and this is especially sort of pertinent to me and Will, we'd all made these connections online, people that listened and people that had reached out to us. And you wanted to go and see these people that weren't on an Instagram icon on your phone. You wanted to go and speak to them. You wanted to go and be around it. And then, and then we started going on these European trips, which was just the most fun you could ever have. And, I've now got a WhatsApp group with 6 mates, 2 brothers, a friend, another friend, me and Will, who are 2 cousins. And it's the most relentless WhatsApp group in the entire world. But it's it's not just rugby; it's all manner of things, and it's people you go and share a common interest with, and we all miss that during lockdown and during COVID.
Oh, we did.
And I don't know what it is specifically about Quins. It's never something I've been able to put my finger on the button with, but I don't know. It's a little bit like supporting Brighton Hove Albion for me. You started at one when you came walking out the womb, and you can't ever take that carpet away from someone's feet. You know, under their feet, it's in you, and once you start, you cannot stop. And because of the way they are, and because of how they play, and because of the players we have, and the supporters we have, and the ground we have, it's so intangible. A love that you have for something like that, and it's impossible to explain for people who don't have it.
No, it really isn't. And there's nothing quite like a match day at the Stoop for me. I just love,
Yeah.
absolutely love it.
And they've really sort of branched out on the match day stuff. You know, when we started doing big games at Twickenham, it became more than just Harlequins fans. They were the first club to really make rugby into an event. And I was at university in Twickenham, and big game was always my favourite day of the year. It was better than Christmas. It was better than birthdays because I'd have all my mates from uni who had lived in the area. And obviously, you know, there's the England games going on in the Six Nations period and the autumn period. And all these guys would go off to university, go off home, sorry, after uni for Christmas.
Mm.
And then they'd all descend back on Twickenham for a day or so because there was this enormous event going on. And suddenly it wasn't just about Quins, it was about rugby. And then, well, people are still going and they sort of pick a dog in the fight rather than just watching a game between, you know, 30 blokes. And
Yeah.
Quins, and because you were a Quins fan and because you were somebody that was leading a bit of a charge and organising people's tickets, people sort of fell into a little bit of interest with it, and the events were so spectacular. And what those events have gone on to become is something that's just insane for the game, and especially for the club. But it's funny when I go to take people to Twickenham to watch Quins or have done in the past, and you know it's a great day and the streets are lined and you go out for beers after and all that sort of stuff. But I do struggle a bit during the games where I'm sort of thinking, right, I can't speak to you now for 80 minutes because this is the bit that is most important. It's not the 2 hours before or the 5 hours after. The 80-minute bit, you go, right, now we're here, everyone's in their seats. I can relax from the administrative side. Everyone's got what they wanted, but I now can't speak to you.
That's how you watch it. You're just totally engrossed in the game. Don't really speak to people.
It depends who I'm with. If I'm with the guys that I sat in the South Stand with for the last 3 or 4 years, then I think we're all a bit like that.
Uh,
Um, and if I go with my dad, he's a very astute watcher, so I'm okay with going with my dad. But if I'm going with mates who I'm taking for the first time, or you know, people who I'm trying to show what it means to me and what the day means and the club means and the people around it means, I'm not great. I sort of go, right, you know, you're in your seat, you've got yourself a drink, you've got yourself a bag of chips, that's fine. But for the next 40 minutes, I won't speak to you. Then you get me for 15 minutes, then you get me for, you know, as long as you want afterwards. But during it, yeah, it's not an easy watch. It never is.
no, no, and that's the thing with Quinton. It's never an easy watch
No,
because it's always tight, it's always tense.
yeah,
But you know, part of the fun.
yeah, it is. It is part of it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. You know,
No,
I go to a
no,
lot. I go to a lot of sport, and I've been to a lot of sport since I moved here. I've been to a lot of games all over the country, all over Europe, and I don't know. It's just there's something about it. You wouldn't have it in any other way. You wouldn't mind coming out on the right end of a few more, but the ones you do get are then that much more special.
yeah, I mean, 2021, I think was so special because what were we, 10th at Christmas night,
Yeah,
something like that.
eighth, something like that,
Absolutely
something like that.
awful. Then
Yeah,
just start goes, and suddenly the next, but yeah, the next game really, we just became the best team in the country,
I know, and it
and
was.
so unexpected
I
and so wonderful and so
yeah,
entertaining.
I found it really difficult for the first 5 or 6 weeks because you couldn't. It was easier watching at home when we were losing because you switch it off at the end and you sort of think about something else. But when we started winning, I found it almost more difficult because you couldn't enjoy it. You couldn't stand there. You couldn't feel it. I mean, I've said this to a few people actually since just in conversations I've had over the last 5 or 6 weeks. I like to think as a portion of my life, I generally don't have any major regrets. You know, I've done things and been silly or whatever else, but the biggest genuine regret I have in my entire life is not being at Bristol.
Yeah.
I watch it once every 3 or 4 weeks, and I wish I could take that day back. I got offered a ticket in the morning of the game,
Oh, did
and
you?
it was I got offered a ticket in the morning of the game. Will and I were both offered a ticket, but it was, you know, the train tickets last minute down to Bristol were expensive, and I'd committed to I'd had plans that day and all this sort of stuff, and yeah, I don't like letting people down last minute with plans. I think I'm a bit of, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something. But I wish I'd turned around and pissed a few people off and been there, because it remains my biggest regret not being in the 500 that day and feeling what that was like.
Absolutely. And it's the fact that, yeah, chance that do we get another day like that? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't think it'll ever be like that.
No,
We'll never have a day like we did against Bordeaux. You know,
no.
we'll never have a day like we did it against Exeter in the final.
Yeah,
it will never be like that. It will never be on that. It will never be on that level of, and if it's similar, the lead up to whatever it became will be so different. There'll be more stories. There'll be more players. There'll be more twists. There'll be more bricks in the road. But yeah, that day in Bristol and then the final. Yeah, it was so incredible being in that Prem final ground with only 10,000 people there. Some of my best mates, and the one thing that made it the most special is that Will and I, as cousins, grew up in sort of separate parts of the country. We were down on the south coast in Brighton. He was in Tring in Hertfordshire, and we were quite similar in age. We'd always go on. We see each other when we were growing up and we were younger. We'd get on at Christmases, and we both sort of moved to London at similar times. But the one thing that the podcast did was it gave me a new best friend. He's not just my cousin anymore. He's my best mate, and going to Paris, Montpellier, Bordeaux, Toulouse, Gloucester, Twickenham, Bath, all the places like London Irish, all those places, and doing it with him has just been the most fun I think we can ever have asked for. And the people you meet along the way and the mates you make, and yeah, that's been, I think, the most enjoyable thing out of the whole lot is not just watching Queens, but doing it with what is now one of my best mates, even though he's my cousin. It's been so much fun.
fabulous. So let's talk about the pod a little bit more. So that came out during COVID. You're
Yeah,
both bored, like so many of us were. But how did it all happen, and how did it grow in the way it did?
I think I think the reason it grew in the way it did, and firstly, I mean, Will must take probably 95% of the credit for all of it. He's the brains. He knows how things work. He does all the social stuff. He works in social media, so
Okay.
we had a bit of a social media presence before we started putting episodes out, and then we got a bit lucky. We had agreed to do a podcast. We thought, yeah, do you know what? Let's give it a crack. If not listen to it, who cares? And I think the day, or maybe you know what, it may have even been the morning that we were going to record our first episode. Paul Gust had left, so we had an episode out 8 hours after, and then we just got lucky at the right time. We started an episode when the coach left. There was a bit of controversy around it. There was a little bit of bad feeling around the group, and then we, well, the team and the club got on this roll on both
Mm.
programs. The men's and the women's both went to go on and be Premiership winners, and we had sort of followed that path so closely up until the last day of the season, and yeah, we got a bit lucky in that first couple of weeks, because people wanted to talk about it. People wanted to sit in the pub with their mates in the patch wherever and think, well, what are we going to do if Gustard goes? Who are we going to get in? How's this going to operate? And I think we filled that gap for a lot of people with wanting to discuss their team, wanting to discuss their club, and you know being on text is fine, but it's a slower form of communication, even with WhatsApp groups and how many, how quickly you can get information from people. But sitting down and having two people have a conversation with energy and with passion for the topic, especially the sport, because, like I say, there's, you know, supporting a club has an energy and a passion you can't quite explain to other people if you don't have the same thing. And I just think we got a bit lucky with the timing, and then we filled a void that people needed for the time that it was happening. And yeah, it sort of went from one strength to another. We were busy on, you know, DMing people and trying to get people on, and finding a name that would draw people maybe outside of Quins. And the club were brilliant, and they were so helpful getting players on. We had guys like Lewis Liner on in our first year, Chris Robshaw, and yeah, a little bit of luck, but also just, I think the energy and the passion that we had for the topic made it so much more enjoyable for people to listen to.
Yeah, sure. So at the point that had started, were you already in Australia?
No, so I only moved here in December 2024. So I was in Twickenham, and Will was living in Clapham. So we were, you know, 8, 9 miles down the road, but felt like a world away. And I didn't
Like,
see Will
not
for
good, isn't it?
I didn't see Will for 6 months or so. I didn't see Will until I think maybe the early, late May, possibly when we went to the Newcastle game together. I'd seen him on a screen for 4 months, and we built this connection, having been, not. I probably hadn't seen him for maybe a year or so, 2 years prior to that, when he was at Union Leeds, I was at Union London, and then we started talking. I mean, hourly, on the phone about what we were going to do next and what we were going to try and put together. And then, yeah, 4 months later, I finally got to actually sit in the pub and have a drink with him. And it was quite surreal, actually. That it was very odd, but it was so much fun.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It feels like such a long time ago now. You almost start to forget just what a weird and disconnected time it was.
Oh, totally bizarre, totally bizarre. But yeah, it just I don't know. I mean, we like I said, we grew up in separate parts of the country, so we were close when we saw each other. But then when we all started going to uni and family Christmases became a little bit more disjointed, we sort of struck this chord over something and would speak literally every single minute of every single day about what we're going to do with this podcast. And it took 4 months to actually sat in the same room with him. It was crazy.
Yeah. So, you move all the way to the other side of the world, and yet you're still actively part of the Quince community.
Mm.
So, what is it that gets you up all these stupid times of the day and night to watch the games and to record the podcast and keep all that connection going?
I mean, I think it's an obligation that I had to Will at the start of it. I moved out here for a multitude of reasons. London had sort of kicked me to the curb a little bit with just the cost of living and teacher salaries and all that other stuff. But I moved out here just for a challenge to myself in a place that I knew I'd have opportunity. But genuinely, one of the toughest things about leaving was leaving going to the Stoop, because I'm going to so much AFL here. I'm going to lots of rugby league. I'm really throwing myself into it. The cricket's awesome, but I haven't got the same real deep rooted connection to a club here as I do back home. But what I think I enjoy about it is that people here feel the same about their sport as I do about mine. And I'd be getting. I mean, last night I was up till 2:15 with a couple of mates watching England win that Test match at Lords, and I've done some stupid forms of travel over my life, early hours in the morning, late hours of the night, coming to and from matches of all sport. But with Quins, it's different. I make sure that I'm back home in time for kickoff. I make sure that I'm connected to it. I make sure that I'm talking to my mates, because they're some of the best mates I've got in the world, and it's the common thread. But yeah, it's been a bit more tricky, paying more for subscription fees and finding weird ways of getting around VPNs and watching European code weekends where the screens and the broadcasting stuff is rubbish. But yeah, and I think what we've been really really lucky with is that over the last 3 or 4 years we've actually had the opportunity to build connections with some of the players. We know them by name now. We know them sort of by communicating with them through their social media channels. So I've got vested interest in some of these guys now, rather than just the whole. And especially when now the England players are out in Argentina,
Mm.
seeing someone like Luke Northmore make his debut, having first met him 3 years ago when we were feeling a little bit silly, and we invited him to our Quins mates Christmas lunch in Clapham, and he came, and he was injured at the time, and he said, "Yeah, boys, I'd love to come." And he sat around with us, and he had dinner, he had lunch with us, had a few drinks, and you got to know the person, having known him through social media and before.
Yeah.
And then seeing him go and play for England, something it was so great. It was almost like watching a mate. It was brilliant,
Yeah.
and I think that's why it's easy with rugby, and I think this is true for a lot of fans. Football's such a huge market, especially the Premier League, that not a very, very, very small percentage of, take Arsenal for example, have a connection with a player or an individual that actually represents their team. Rugby's a smaller market, and especially at Quins, they make a real effort to make sure that you feel a personal connection with the players. They spend hours walking around the pitch after writing autographs and taking selfies. I think it's why the club were keen on having players on our podcast, was because it's an opportunity for the player to make a connection with the fan. That draws people into the game, and we've been really lucky with that. Guys like Caden Murley, guys like Marcus Smith playing for the Lions now, guys like Alex Dombrand, who we first saw as a slightly chubby post university student, is now our captain. Guys like Danny Kerr, who's the one constant through of every Harlequins fan there's been over the last 20 years. People have a connection with Danny Kerr, whether you've met him 10 years ago, you met him 2 weeks ago. And I think that's what gets you up in the middle of the night, because you have not only interested in the guys that are playing, but you've got interest in the club and how they're doing. And you also have an interest in the feelings and the emotions of the people that are in the same boat as you watching.
Mm, that's interesting. And as well as rugby, I mean, you're a keen cricket fan.
Yeah.
Is it the same things that attract you, think, to cricket and to hockey, as it is to rugby?
Um, Hockey, not so much. Hockey was something that hockey's not a huge market. It translates terribly to TV. But I played a really good level of hockey before COVID. Never quite bounced back. But I grew up as a Brighton Hove Albion fan with my dad, and
Mm.
you know, my dad has been he was born by the sea in Brighton. He'll live by the sea in Brighton. He'll die by the sea in Brighton. He bleeds like blue and white stripes is his entire lifeblood. And we've been to some horrible places across the country on Tuesday nights in League One and League Two, and then we got into the Championship. I was at the League One player final in 2005 when Leon Knight scored an 81st minute penalty, and I was 8 years old. And then we got into the Championship, and then we got this new stadium, and then we got into the Premier League. You think, oh my God, like this is it. We're in the Premier League, and then we got into Europe of all things. And
Mm.
actually, this is a little bit of a sad story, but the night that Brighton first played in Europe against Athens was the 23rd of September 2023, and I had raced down from work from London. My brother was in Leeds, so he was sort of taken a half day and had come down, and me, my dad, and my brother were sat in the West Stand at the Amex watching our team play in Europe, and we lost the game 3-2. Came out the ground, got back to the car. We stopped at this little roadside place for a pizza before we had to get back get back on the train first thing in the morning to get back to work. And we got a phone call from my grandpa who'd had to take my grandma into hospital, and she actually died that night at about 3-4 in the morning. And it's a weird way of looking at it, but had my team not been playing in Europe on a random Thursday night in September, Brighton never played a Thursday night. They play Saturday, they might play a midweek cup, but they never play on a Thursday night. But had they not, my dad and my brother and me hadn't have been 10 minutes away from the hospital and had the opportunity to say goodbye to my grandma. And it's a weird thing because my sister wasn't there. She's not a football fan, but it's something I can never put a price on. Supporting Brighton my whole life. If it was only for that moment that I got to say goodbye to my lovely grandma, it was worth it in that moment. If we never win an FA Cup, if we never win a League Cup, if we never win anything else, it will be worth it for that moment. And it's a weird way of looking at it. We wrote an email to Roberto De Zerbi the week after, thanking him, this mad Italian manager that we had, because had he not taken Brighton from a mid-table side, which we were all incredibly happy with, we got into Europe, we played on a Thursday night, and I got to say goodbye to my grandma. And it's such a weird way of looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? How fates align.
Yeah, but I'll never forget. I'll never forget the day. I'll never forget. You know, my dad was in tears as the players were walking out onto the pitch. There was the big Europa League banner. The Ajax fans were going ballistic in the corner. It was blue and white stripes everywhere. It was incredible, and we lost 3-2. But we were, you know, a couple of weeks later, my dad went out to Marseille. He dreamed of watching Brighton play outside of the European kingdom his whole life. They went to Marseille. My brother, I could get it off work, but for that moment, we were so pleased, even though we'd lost. And then we had slightly different emotions in the evening when we were in the hospital. But it'll be a day that I'll never forget for two reasons. And it's a date that will be etched in my brain because I support a football club, and because it was the same day that my grandma died. But had we not had the two together, I don't know. It's a difficult thing to comprehend.
Yeah, it really is. I think it's an odd thing in sports supporting when you talk to a lot of sports fans is a lot of the stuff they talk about isn't so much about the winning and losing. Yeah, some of that, of course, there is. But it's all that other stuff that
Absolutely.
people really talk about, the memories, the
Yeah.
friends, the family, the camaraderie. Um, and that's more than anything for me. That's when I think back through all the years I've been going to football and rugby and cricket. Yeah, I can remember
Yeah.
those results. I remember some of those special moments. But more than anything else, it's about the people I'm with.
Yeah. I don't remember a single minute of the game. Brighton beat Bristol City in the League One player final. I was 8 years old. I remember seeing Leon Knight score a penalty in the 81st minute. I don't remember a single other thing about the game, but I remember being in the car on the way back from Cardiff with my dad. I remember that. It's stuff like that. It absolutely is, and it's such a bizarre world. And there's the famous comedian actually, Reece James, who was on Mock the Week a lot, is a mad Spurs fan.
Mm.
And before the Europa League final, 3 or 4 weeks ago, he actually released like an extract from his book about what it meant to be for him to be a Spurs fan. And he told this story about his dad buying him a little box with a season ticket in, and what that meant. And he went on this, big elaborate, story about Spurs and his family and this and that and else. But actually, what his dad bought him for Christmas wasn't just a little box with a season ticket in. It was a box of hope. And that's what it is to be a sports fan. You always hope that one day your team is going to win something. Harlequins are never going to have the storied history of Manchester United in the 2000s. We're never going to have the European success of the Leicester team of the ages in rugby, or that Saracens team and all that went there. We're never going to have that. But you think you might have a portion of it. You might have that one day, and I hate Crystal Palace as much as the next Brighton fan, but actually watching those Crystal Palace fans lift an FA Cup, it cut me to my soul. But you know what they've been through. You know what's led them to that moment. And when Quins won the Premiership in 2021, I remember it in 2012. I remember all the players. I remember some of the stories. But being on that journey towards it with my cousin, through the podcast, through the people that we met, no one can ever take that away from me. Whether it was 10,000 people, whether it was 5 people, whether it was 80,000 people in the ground, that's a day that I will live. I'll remember as long as I have breath in my body, because of what it meant to get there. It wasn't just about winning at the end of the 80 minutes. It's what it led us there. Who you did it with. I've got some of the best photos in the world of me and Will in arms in the stadium, crying, celebrating, relief, joy, panic, all of it. You can never ever take those memories away from people.
Nah, it's such a heightened state of emotion, isn't it? It just stays with you.
And people talk about men's mental health and people being closed books and not speaking enough. You want to see a group of 20,000 people, letting out their emotions. Go and stand on any terrace in any sports ground anywhere in the country at 3 o'clock on a Saturday. Watch people be emotional. Watch people have an outlet for their emotions. It's watch them talk to their mates about things they wouldn't talk to about if they were on the phone on a Tuesday night on the way back from work. It's what you share with people. It's the journey you go on. It's the highest of highs that you get to experience with the people, and it's being at the bottom of that arc, thinking, well, one day it might get better. One day we might do this. One day we might, win. I'm living in Australia at the minute, and St Kilda are a massive AFL club, and I walk around the city, and I see people wearing St Kilda jumpers with a tagline on it that says "Just once before I die." That's all they want. They just want to win it once before they die, and that'd be enough. They don't want 10 years of storied success. They don't want 15 years at the top, eternal glory. They just want to see their team win it once, and that would be enough.
I did in some ways. That's more special. So I live in Norwich, so I followed Norwich City all my life. Used to be a season ticket holder, and so on. I moved up to Liverpool in 2000. So I took a lot of football in Liverpool. But I have a counter argument with Liverpool fans, because they might look at us as this silly little club who never do anything. But what I say is, but I think for us, I mean, maybe not so much now because success has been rarer for them, but for us, success is winning a few games. Success is getting promoted. Success is scraping survival. We have so much success alongside failure every single season. To win something would just be unbelievable. I think if it happens too much, you can just lose sight of what a wonderful thing that actually is.
Yeah, and there's a Manchester City fan. I can't remember his name. He does all these Instagram, TikToky posts, and I remember seeing something a couple of years ago that his son, I think, is 12 or 13 years old now, and he's bored of going to Wembley. They go all the time. But you think he's 12, 13. That's all he knows. But for right or wrong, some of these Man City fans who were at Main Road when the club nearly went out of business, and now what they've got to, You think, well, look, that's your journey, and that's great. But you are right. As a Harlequins fan, especially sort of in the years in the Kingston era, winning 2 or 3 games on the bounce at home was enough. We'll go to Leicester away, we'll get beat. We'll go to Saracens away, we'll get beat. We'll go to Bath, we'll get beat. All right, that's fine. We might have a nice day on the train. We'll be with our mates, and it's fine. We lose together, but just winning 3 or 4 games in a row would be great. Playing and that's why I think, especially with Quins in the last 2 or 3 years, sort of post that success in 2021, it's why this year has been almost harder because we've lost by not doing it our way, and I think that's why people have been a bit upset. You want to identify with something. Identifying with winning and losing is easy because you either win or you lose, and that's the side of the fence you sit on. But if you're going to lose, at least do it in a way that we all believe in. I got into
lost
I
our
got
way.
into
Sorry, go on.
yeah, no, just we did lose our way, but I got into a real sweet spot with my sports teams in a couple of years ago, where Quins were playing in a way that people wanted to watch and talk about. Brighton were playing in a way that was interesting and fun and progressive, and then England cricket started doing all this mad stuff, but scoring 400 in a day. And for a period of time, the 3 big sports teams in my life was playing the most watchable form of their sport, and I thought, how good is this? But it might only last another couple of years, and then it'll be something totally different. But at least I can look back on this time and go, well, I went to go and watch days of cricket with my mates. I went to go and watch Brighton with my dad. I went to go and watch Quins with my cousin and my mates. And in 50 years' time, I'll tell stories of all of it because it means that much to the people you shared it with.
Yeah, no, that's huge. Wonderful. One last question, if I may, Michael. What would you say to someone who they've been a Norwich fan for many years, season ticket holder and so on, and then suddenly out the blue, they decide they're an Arsenal fan instead?
Yeah.
What would you say to that? Not to give too much right, but that is one of the presenters.
No, I know it's a very good question. A lot of my mates for years rebelled on being Brighton fans because we were terrible. Everyone wanted to be Arsenal, Chelsea, United fans. But I think, I mean, you fall in love with things for a reason, right? You fall in love with teams for a reason. It's because it's where you're from, or it might be a certain player, whatever it may be. But the journey to what is success for your team, if it's that much harder, if it's that much longer, if it's that much more painful, if it's that much more, desperate and dark and depressing and filled with sleepless nights, long journeys, resentment, bitterness, tears, when you actually get there, it's better than anything you could ever experience, especially if you go along that journey with people that you love and care about, all fighting the same battle. It's you can't ever take those European nights with me, my dad, and my brother away from me. You can't ever take that 2021 Premiership title with Quins away from me. If England go and win the Ashes in Australia this year, I'm going to go to 3 Test matches with 3 of my best mates. If we go and beat them 4 or 5-0, having won in Australia for going on 15, 16, 17 years. If I'm there to see it and I've watched England cricket and Brighton football and Harlequins, you can never take that away from me because it's been harder.
Yeah,
it's been harder.
winning
is fun.
Recently, the Ashes has just been painful. Now it's started to switch sides a little more, but it's this week, and I think we've got such a good chance this time.
But if we lose 5-0 this time round, and I'm still living here in 4 years' time, if we then go and win it, it'll be even sweeter because we have to wait even longer for it. You can't cut corners on what it means to support your teams. You can't find that totally unfathomable thing that you can't ever lose because you love it so much. And when it takes you to where you want to be, it's absolutely Elysium with your best mates, with your family. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, awesome. Well, look, thanks ever so much for doing this. Do appreciate
no worries.
Appreciate your time, and
It's an easy topic for me to talk about this.
Yeah, like I kind of sense you could do lots more of it.
Yeah,
Look, mate, I hope you love the Ashes. It's going to be awesome.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, what a great time to
I've
be.
got Ashes. I've got Adelaide, Melbourne, and Sydney. Going all 3 days in Adelaide, all 5 days in Melbourne, all 5 days at Sydney. So if it was two all going down the last at Sydney, then everything would be great. I worry that we might get to Adelaide and be 2-0 down, but we'll see.
Well, let's hope not. And you've got the last two Lions tests. Is that right?
Yeah, so we're going to the Pacifica game on the Tuesday. Then me and Will are going to the MCG test on the Saturday. Then I'm racing up to Sydney for the third test as well. So in the space of 6 months, I'm ticking off some pretty cool bucket lists, which is awesome.
Fantastic stuff. But you're giving up the podcast.
Yeah, it's just the time difference, and also like I could probably just about still manage it, but it's work for Will, and it's I once we stop recording, my job is essentially done, but it's the editing and the social media output, which is just so time consuming if you're not doing it together. And I think we said when I moved here, we had half a season to keep it going, but then I think starting again with a full season, I think not just being there with him was going to be a bit too. I don't know. It's been great. We've loved every single minute of it. We might end up dropping in once every 5 or 6 weeks just because we fancy a chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, the regularity of it will be not the same just because of how consuming it is to get content out. And Will's got a very, very busy, high pressure job, so putting that on his plate alongside it is tough. But that's why I think the Lions is really important to us. And Will's never been my first Lions tour, so to do that together as a bit of a sign off will be pretty cool. And if Marcus Smith kicks a winning drop goal in Sydney in front of 80,000 people, then it'll be a nice ending.
It would, wouldn't it? Just the perfect full stop to the whole thing.
It would be a perfect full stop. That man's given me more joy than most people on the planet in the last 4 or 5 years. So if it's a winning drop goal in Sydney at a 1-1 drawn series and Marcus nudges it over to win the game 21-17, if that's the ending that I get, then I've reached the summit. Then, as every sports fan hopes, we dream of those moments.
Oh, we do. But here's the thing: even if he does, he'll still get slagged off in the media.
Of course,
yeah. Of
course.
He's the new Owen Farrell for that. So
there's tall poppy syndrome, isn't it? People are. Let's drag down those that shine brightest and those that shout loudest.
Yeah, I'm watching the game on Saturday. I thought Finn Smith was average at best, maybe poor.
Boring.
Yeah, he didn't do much wrong, but he didn't actually do much.
No.
But he seemed to get praise for that. And you think if Marcus had done that,
yeah,
you'd all be calling for his head.
I know. And then Marcus came on against the Brumbies and added spark and life, and sleight of hand, scored scored his own try, assisted another, and just looked great while he was doing it. Red Lions red suits him, but yeah, it's just it's why people attack. I mean, all sorts of athletes. It's why people look at. I'm trying to think of a really good example, but when Wayne Rooney first got on the scene, he was a cocky little twat from Merseyside. Let's hammer him.
Every top scorer England have had, all I ever see is people go, "Oh, he didn't do it in the big games."
No.
Or take away like Harry Kane, take away his penalties, and he's not. Take away his penalties, and I think he's still England's top goal.
Yeah. I mean, I loved Owen Farrell for England. I hated him for Saracens, but as a Harlequins fan, that's my right. But the media drove him out. They drove out one of our greatest players. It's the same thing that happened to, tennis players like Kyrgios. The Australian media hounded Kyrgios because of what he was, but he's also the most exciting thing they've ever had. People are quick and bitter and jealous and resentful of those that shine brighter, and it's sad, but that's unfortunately the modern world, and people can hide behind keyboards and say what they like. Yeah. But supporting a team is always true and honest and right and full of joy and hope. That's why it's so great. There's such little negativity in the 80 minutes you spend watching your team. Unless you're getting thumped by 60 points by Leinster.
Yeah, that was not nice. Yeah. But do you know what? I watched it with some mates. Once it became obvious it was not going to be a good day,
yeah,
settled into enjoying ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the small wins, isn't it? When you lose, you take the little wins.
Yeah, absolutely. You turn it into social and you have fun with it. Yeah. Well, perfect. I'll miss the pod. So thank you for the years you've done
No
it.
worries, mate. It's been great. It's been awesome.
You know, 2 Woods, 6 Nations, maybe. How about that?
Maybe, yeah, maybe. I mean, the Six Nations is always harder. It's on a weird times, but I'd be surprised if we didn't dip in and out once every 6-7 weeks. But we'll see. We'll have to see what brings. But no, we'll keep pumping the line stuff. We'll land on Saturday, so I'm looking forward to seeing him, and we'll have a nice sort of 10 days together, which would be cool.
Fantastic. We have a great time. Really hope
Yeah, we'll
see that 3-0 we're all hoping for. And,
well, I almost hope it's 2-1. I hope they lose in Brisbane because I'm not going, and then we get this big finish of 2-1. So
yeah, there's something great
yeah.
about having that last test. It all rests on it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You know,
I feel like if we
if
don't 3-0 them, it's going to feel a bit disappointing.
if we go to Sydney and it's 2-0 already, 3-0 might feel a bit token. I almost hope it's 1-1 going down the last, and we win in Melbourne and Sydney because those are the two that I'm going to.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I'm sure everyone's having a great time.
And I hope we win the Ashes 3-2, having lost the first two, and then we win at Adelaide, Melbourne, and Sydney, because that means I'll be there for those as well. So
fair enough. I'll bear that in mind. Go 2 down. I'll spare that thought for you anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, Jim. Well, look, send me all the information. I'll have a listen when it comes out.
Brilliant. Thanks again. Take care.
No worries. I look forward to seeing you. See you in a bit.
See you later. Bye now.
Big thanks to Michael for his time. Please check out his and Will's podcast, 2 Woods and 4 Nations, as they follow the fortunes of the British and Irish Lions in Australia, as well as all of the back episodes of 2 Woods and 4 Quarters, charting the past few Harlequins seasons. That's all for this episode. Until next time.